Congress now demands answers from one of Fauci's chief advisors, his lieutenant, some might say his hatchet man, the guy who went out and did the Fauci dirty work. This guy's name is Dr. David Morenz. And now Congress wants his cell phone records because apparently he was using an off-the-books cell phone so that it wouldn't be subject to Freedom of Information Act requests. And we know other people who've done this, like, I don't know, Hillary Clinton with her deleted emails and her server. So now the subcommittee on the coronavirus pandemic via Brad Wenstrup sent a letter over to this guy, Dr. David Morenz, for his involvement at the NIAID. From Brad Wenstrup. He says, hey, Mr. David Morenz, MD, the senior scientific advisor at the Office of the Director of the NIAID, which is where we know Fauci comes from. They say, Dr. Morenz, documents in the possession of our committee suggest that you may have used your personal email to avoid transparency and Freedom of Information Act requests, and potentially intentionally deleted federal records and acted in your official capacity to disparage your fellow scientists, including by encouraging litigation against them. All right. So we know that there were a bunch of bullies at the NIAID. Anybody challenged the status quo. Anybody threatened their mainstream narrative. They were attacked. They were expunged from the community and threatened. And this guy who was there maybe deleted the evidence that he was even threatening them with lawsuits. Further, your emails also raise concerns that you may have knowledge or information suggesting that, there it is, Dr. Anthony Fauci, former director of NIAID, wished to influence the COVID origins narrative without, quote, his fingerprints, without Fauci's, quote, fingerprints, delegated to somebody else to do. Congress says, this is all very troubling indeed, and it raises serious questions. As such, we are requesting documents and communications from your personal email and your personal cell phone that are responsive to our questions. Point 1. In one email, you write, quote, that you always try to communicate over Gmail because my NIH email is FOIA'd constantly. Huh? You wrote in one email that you specifically try to use your secret server so that you can evade public records? You continue, you said in an email, quote, don't worry, just send to any one of my addresses and I will delete anything I don't want to see in the New York Times. Oh, that's nice. Oh, so that's what he said. This is an email, footnote 3, which references this, a senior advisor to Peter Daszak. Oh, remember Peter Daszak from EcoHealth Alliance? Yeah, he was the guy who actually had the contracts that was working with the Wuhan lab. So this guy, senior science advisor from NIAID, is saying, don't worry, send it to my off-the-books email address and I'll delete anything that is bad. So these two schemers trying to cover up what they have done agree. From David Morenz at gmail.com, 9/9/2021, sent over to Peter Daszak, and copying a bunch of people, including Christian Anderson. He says, Peter and colleagues, as you know, I always try to communicate on Gmail because my NIH email is FOIA'd constantly. Yesterday, my Gmail was hacked, probably by these GOF a-holes, maybe gain-of-function a-holes. And until IT can get it fixed, I may occasionally email from my NIH account, which, you should, because this is all official business. It spent a couple hours today, but couldn't fix it. IT spent a couple hours today, but couldn't fix it. Stuff sent to my Gmail gets to my phone, but not my NIH computer. Don't worry. Just send to any of my addresses, and I will delete anything I don't want to see in the New York Times. Coming from his Gmail account with his work and his cell phone. That's interesting. Isn't this a government bureaucrat who's supposed to be working for the betterment of society and blah, blah, blah? And he's supposed to be open and transparent and honest with us? In addition to your attempt to hide involvement with certain scientists regarding the origins of COVID, you also used your official position to disparage others you disagreed with, and you did it on numerous occasions. On one occasion, in response to a report from The Intercept that new details emerge about the vid research at Chinese labs, you used your official platform to encourage EcoHealth and Daszak to, quote, not rule out suing these a-holes for slander. While this email was also sent from your personal email, your email signature includes OD, which means Office of the Director, NIAID, which means National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, and NIH, National Institutes of Health. So these guys love their titles. I mean, that's basically what they work for. That's why they have so many letters after their names. OD, NIAID, NIH. They're like, bro, nice combo on that. OD, NIAID, NIH. Whew. This gives the appearance of a government official encouraging litigation against the press for reporting that does not follow the bureaucrats' preconceived narrative, saying it's unacceptable. Here's the email sent from my iPhone. Look at all those letters. See the OD, NIAID, NIH. Do not rule out suing these a-holes for slander. Signed, D. On another occasion, in response to a different scientist's characterization of Dr. Richard Ebright as espousing amateurish, disingenuous BS regarding the research, you responded, amen and good for you. You are right. Ebright and his ilk are not only not experts, but they're also harmful demagogues. Getting very aggressive here. Saying, good for you. You are right. His ilk are not experts. They need to be called out. Because I am in government, I can only FO this off the record, but I have do again and again. Some of them are knowingly promoting false equivalences. They interviewed a Holocaust survivor. They would say they have to give equal time and space to a Nazi murderer. They have no shame. Signed by David Morans, OD, NIAID, NIH. So it's like official government stuff, which means it should go on official government emails. On a third occasion, this time with your official email address, he swapped back over for one reason. You responded to another scientist's characterization of Dr. Chan as quite dangerous. You said, I know of Alina Chan based on 2 papers of hers I came across, one of which was a screed, it seemed biased, and not the work of a scientist with integrity. These emails raise additional concerns about your objectivity while stationed in the office of the NIAID. You get billions of dollars annually. So we want to know about your decisions. Now, other documents say that Fauci wanted you to do stuff without his fingerprints. Documents previously released and emails show that doctors Fauci and Collins, quote, prompted the drafting of a paper to, quote, disprove the lab leak theory. They initiated it. The paper turned into that paper that we've talked a lot about here, The Proximal Origin of COVID. After increased pressure from Collins, Dr. Fauci appeared to cite the Proximal Origins paper from the White House podium. So they wrote a paper that Fauci could reference to cover up his story. Same exact pattern that happened with the Hunter Biden laptop. At the time, however, Dr. Fauci publicly claimed to not remember the name of the paper or those who wrote it. Yeah, because it would have been obvious that his people did. Yet, in response to the private follow-up question, Fauci cited the Proximal Origins, the very paper that he prompted a few months earlier, as proof it wasn't a leak. But now, a new email suggested that Dr. Fauci took additional efforts to tamp down the lab leak theory by requesting you, David, speak with the press regarding the origins. Why? Because he did not want to directly influence the stories. On July 29, 2021, you wrote the following, quote, but today, to my surprise, my boss Fauci actually asked me to speak to the National Geographic on the records. I interpret this to mean that our government is lightening up, but that Tony doesn't want his fingerprints on origin stories. Of course not, because he is a part of the origin. This came out from this email at NIAID.gov to Jason, Tulane, Utah, and others. This is from David Morans. He says, Jason, I can almost always talk on background off the record, and if needed, I might be able to speak on the record. In the U.S. government, we all have to get approval from HHS, Health and Human Services, or the White House to speak to the press. Sometimes they are touchy about certain issues and say, no, you can't talk about that. For many months, I have not been approved to talk about origins on the record. Of course not. But today, to my total surprise, my boss, Tony Fauci, actually asked me to speak to National Geographic. I interpret this to mean that Tony doesn't want his fingerprints on origin stories. Bottom line, I can speak to you on background, and if need or want quotations or attributions, you can request to speak to me formally. They can only say no, or better yet, they can steer you back over to Tony. Have you asked Dr. Newsom about this, Dr. Newman? So Congress says, all right, David, in the interview reference in your email, you not only strongly imply against a lab leak, but you further imply the U.S. should just stop searching for it. You stated, there is a progenitor virus out there somewhere, and we should look for it, but at some point it crosses over from doing due diligence to just wasting time and just being crazy. A bunch of crazy people who want to know where it came from and whether our government was involved in it, so that it doesn't happen again, and so that the people responsible for all of this death and madness can be held responsible. That's just crazy, though. We may have seen that point already, he says. To be clear, investigating the source that has killed more than 1 million Americans is not wasting time or being crazy. This raises questions about this guy's competency entirely. And so to better assist us, we want all of your personal email accounts, primarily this email, and any personal cell phones, but primarily this personal cell phone, very soon. We also want all documents about the drafting of these publications in the Lancet, in Nature Medicine. Who are you communicating with when you drafted all of these? We also want all documents and text messages about Wuhan, EcoHealth, and the origins from November 1, 2019 up to the current day, including from all of these people. Fauci, Collins, Tabak, and the rest of the other bureaucratic state, including Peter Daszak from EcoHealth Alliance, and Shi Zheng Li, David Moran's conversations with himself, and others. They continue saying the Select Subcommittee has the authority to do this under House Resolution 5. And if you have any questions about this, please let us know. Sincerely, your friend Brad Wenstrup, Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic. So, very interesting. And we know that a lot of this was going on. I mean, these people were being dishonest with us from day one. They kept flip-flopping all the time. Put the mask on. No, you don't need the mask. No, wait, sorry about that. Actually, you do need the mask again. And, everything has just been a disaster. But part of the question was it a cover-up? Was this something where they were actively engaged in surreptitious maneuvering in order to get their narrative across and through and in effect? Of course, the answer is yes. The question from our perspective has been, who did it? And as we continue to peel back the layers of the onion, we find more and more people. This guy's just another one on the list. Dr. David Moran's, or from the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Congress demanding his cell phone records. Hopefully they get them, and we can review all of them and see how far this disgusting rabbit hole goes.